No alien could lift the ancient sword on an alien planet, until the human tried. The archaeological camp on Keth 7 bustled with activity as scientists from across the Galactic Council documented their final measurements. For 3 standard years, the expedition had studied the obsidian temple at the heart of the predecessor ruins, and now they were preparing to declare defeat. At the center of the ancient structure, embedded in a platform of crystalline stone, rested a massive sword that had defied every attempt to move it. Dr. Marcus Chen wiped the red dust from his visor as he watched the Thrain warriors make their final attempt. Commander Syrinx, standing nearly 3 meters tall with muscles like coiled steel cables, gripped the sword's hilt with all 4 of his massive hands. The warrior's exoskeleton creaked as he pulled, his species' legendary strength focused entirely on the ancient weapon. The sword didn't budge even a millimeter. Syrinx released the hilt and stepped back, his breathing heavy through his respirator. Like all species in the Council except humanity, the Thrain had evolved on a low-gravity world. Their strength was impressive by any measure, easily capable of lifting 800 kilograms on their homeworld. But here on Keth 7, with its Earth-like gravity, even their enhanced physiology struggled. The commander shook his head at High Curator Vethril, who stood observing with his usual air of superiority. "It is as I predicted," Vethril announced, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into flat galactic standard. The Krell scholar's compound eyes reflected the strange purple glow emanating from the sword. The predecessors engineered this as a test for their own species. Since they are extinct, the weapon will remain here for eternity. We should preserve this site as is and move on to more productive research. The ENTH Arabicrot Arabikiet had tried using their advanced gravitational manipulation technology. The Shen had attempted quantum phase shifting. The Vorath had even brought specialized drilling equipment to cut through the stone platform itself, only to watch their diamond-tipped drills shatter against the crystalline surface. The human archaeologist had been a late addition to the expedition, arrived only 3 months ago when Earth finally secured enough political capital to send a representative. His presence had been tolerated rather than welcomed. Humanity was still new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 15 years prior. To species like the Krell, who had been exploring the stars for 10,000 years, humans were infants playing at archaeology. Marcus approached the central platform as the team began packing their equipment. The sword was magnificent even after millions of years. It stood nearly 2 meters tall, its blade a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The hilt was wrapped in some material that looked like leather but felt warm to the touch, almost organic. Strange symbols ran along the fuller of the blade, glowing with that persistent purple light that made their scanning equipment malfunction. "Doctor." "Chen, please step away from the artifact," Vethril called out. "We are sealing the chamber for preservation." Several scientists turned to stare at the human. Commander Syrinx made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter, though it came out as a series of harsh barks. "Human, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but be reasonable," the Thrain commander said, his tone almost pitying. "If I cannot move it with my strength, what hope do you have? Your species is among the physically weakest in the Council." Marcus stood only 1.8 meters tall, weighed less than 90 kilograms, and lacked any natural armor, enhanced sensory organs, or biological weapons. When humans first made contact with the Galactic Council, several species had wondered how such delicate creatures had survived long enough to develop technology. "Expedition protocol grants each member 1 documented attempt," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm just following procedure. We have a schedule to maintain." The material seemed to shift slightly under his grip, conforming to his hands in a way it hadn't for previous attempts. The other scientists gathered around to watch, some with amusement, others with anthropological curiosity. They wanted to see what the human would try. Would he attempt to use leverage, some kind of technique? Perhaps humans had developed a unique approach to problem-solving that came from their young civilization's different perspective. Marcus did something none of them expected. He simply pulled. He planted his feet shoulder-width apart, bent his knees slightly, engaged his core, and lifted with his legs and back in one smooth motion. It was the same movement humans had used for tens of thousands of years to lift heavy objects, refined through millennia of labor and warfare. There was no trick, no technology, no clever workaround, just the application of force through proper biomechanical form. The sword slid free from the stone with a sound like a bell being struck. The resonance vibrated through the entire chamber, building in intensity until dust rained from the ceiling and the other scientists stumbled backward. Purple light exploded outward from the blade, filling the temple with luminescence that made their protective visors automatically darken. Marcus stood holding the sword aloft, his muscles straining but stable under the weapon's weight. It had to mass at least 200 kilograms according to their scans, yet the human held it steady. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breathing came heavy, but he didn't collapse or drop the blade. "Impossible," Vethril whispered. The chamber transformed around them. Holographic projectors built into the walls activated for the first time in millions of years, filling the space with images. Figures appeared, standing 3 meters tall, rendered in perfect detail. They were humanoid, bipedal with 2 arms and legs, forward-facing eyes, and skeletal structures that suggested they had evolved on a high-gravity world. The predecessors. "We who came before," the hologram spoke, its voice translated simultaneously into every language known to the galactic database, "have waited long for our inheritors to emerge. You who hold this blade have proven the first qualification. You possess natural strength forged in adversity, unchanged by artificial enhancement, evolved under the weight of a harsh world." Earth statistics scrolled past. 1 standard gravity, variable climate zones, active tectonic plates, atmospheric oxygen levels that most species found uncomfortably high, native predators that had pushed human ancestors to develop endurance and tool use. "We seeded worlds across the galaxy," the predecessor continued, "and watched as life evolved. Most worlds were gentle, producing species of great intelligence but limited physical capability. Some species modified themselves, trading natural strength for technological enhancement. But we searched for a world harsh enough to forge inheritors who could bear the burden we leave behind. A world of struggle, where survival demanded both strength and adaptability. The gentle species cannot lift our legacy," the voice explained. "Their worlds were too kind. The enhanced species cannot claim it. They are no longer what evolution made them. But you, inheritors of the harsh world, you carry the strength we need. The trials await below. Prove yourself worthy and claim what we leave behind." The weapon was trying to communicate, showing him images of passages opening beneath the temple, of chambers and corridors leading down into darkness. Commander Syrinx moved forward, his hand on his plasma weapon. "Human, you will surrender that artifact to proper military authority immediately. This is an archaeological find of unprecedented importance." The weapon wouldn't release him. They had bonded somehow, and it wanted him to go deeper. The archaeological camp's proximity alarms suddenly screamed to life, the sound piercing even through the temple's thick walls. Every handheld device in the chamber lit up with emergency warnings. Vethril checked his scanner, and his entire body went rigid. "Unknown vessels emerging from FTL," he reported, his voice losing its usual condescension. 15 contacts, configuration unlike any known species. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Compliance is not an option. Purge begins in 30 standard minutes. The expedition's transport craft, visible on the plain below, erupted in flames as precise energy weapons reduced them to slag. There was no escape off-world now. The only path was down, following the human with the impossible sword into the depths of a temple built by the dead. The first explosion shook the temple as Marcus ran deeper into the corridor, the ancient sword heavy in his grip, but somehow feeling more natural with each step. Behind him, the expedition team scrambled to follow, their academic disagreements forgotten in the face of immediate death. Vethril's 6 legs carried him with surprising speed, while Commander Syrinx brought up the rear, his plasma rifle ready as debris rained from the ceiling. The passageway responded to Marcus's presence, lighting up with the same purple glow that emanated from the sword. Walls shifted and reformed, creating a clear path forward while sealing off side corridors behind them. It was as if the temple itself was alive, guiding them away from danger and deeper into its heart. Another blast hit closer, and Marcus heard the distinctive sound of energy weapons firing. Through a gap in the wall, he caught a glimpse of what was attacking them. The enemy soldiers looked like they had been grown rather than built biomechanical nightmares that moved with fluid grace despite their size. They flowed through the temple entrance like liquid metal, their weapons integrated into their bodies. "They're already inside," Syrinx shouted, firing several shots back up the corridor. The plasma bolts hit one of the creatures, but it simply absorbed the energy and continued advancing. "My weapons are ineffective." Images flooded his mind, not quite memories, but something close. He saw the predecessors standing in this very temple, tall and powerful, preparing for a threat they knew would come eventually. He saw them placing the sword, encoding it with information, turning it into both a key and a guide. And he saw their enemies, the same biomechanical horrors now pursuing the expedition, creatures that had hunted the predecessors across the galaxy millions of years ago. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, and the team stumbled inside as the entrance sealed behind them with a solid thunk that cut off the sounds of pursuit. They stood panting in the purple light, surrounded by walls covered in the same strange symbols that decorated the sword. "What is this place?" One of the ENTH Hindi, Enus Hindi, Enus scientists asked, their tentacles waving nervously as they examined their malfunctioning equipment. Marcus felt the sword pulling at his consciousness again, showing him more. This was a testing chamber, the first of several. The predecessors had designed these trials to ensure that whoever claimed their legacy was truly worthy, that they possessed not just the ability to lift the sword, but the physical and mental capacity to use what lay beyond. The chamber suddenly shifted. The walls moved apart, doubling the space, and the gravity increased. Marcus felt the change immediately, his knees bending slightly under the added weight. His heart rate increased as his body automatically adjusted to the new conditions. Around him, the other species reacted far worse. Vethril collapsed onto his belly, his legs unable to support him under 1.5 times Earth gravity. The ENTH Hindi, Enus Hindi, Nus scientist made a sound of distress as their tentacles went limp. Even Commander Syrinx, despite his impressive strength, dropped to one knee, his breathing labored through his respirator. "Cannot breathe properly," Syrinx gasped. "Gravity too high." Earth's gravity was exactly one standard G, higher than 90% of habitable worlds in the known galaxy. Humans had evolved under this constant pressure, developing dense bones, powerful hearts, and muscles adapted to constant heavy work. What was crushing to the other species was merely exhausting for him. The sword pulsed again, and a holographic display appeared showing a series of heavy mechanisms that needed to be manipulated to open the far door. Marcus understood immediately. This wasn't just a test of raw strength, but of the ability to perform complex physical tasks while exhausted under high gravity for an extended period. It was testing human endurance. He moved to the first mechanism, a massive wheel that needed to be turned. His shoulders burned as he threw his weight against it, forcing it to rotate. Sweat poured down his face, his breathing came in controlled bursts, but he kept moving. This was what human ancestors had done for hundreds of thousands of years. Persistence hunting across African plains, running down prey not through speed, but through the ability to keep going long after other predators had given up. "How is he still moving?" one of the scientists whispered. "Humans evolved as endurance predators," Vethril managed to say from his prone position, his scientific mind working even in crisis. Their homeworld forced them to develop cardiovascular systems far more efficient than ours. They can maintain physical exertion for hours, even days, in ways we cannot. Each one required different movements, pulling, pushing, lifting, all designed to test various aspects of physical capability. His muscles screamed in protest, but he had run marathons back on Earth, had trained in his planet's various extreme environments. This was brutal, but it was survivable. The far door finally opened, and the gravity returned to normal. The other species gasped in relief as Marcus helped them to their feet. They looked at the human with new understanding. What they had always considered a weakness, humanity's need for high gravity and dense atmosphere, was actually a strength. Earth had been a forge, and it had created something the gentler worlds could not. They continued deeper, and Marcus felt the sword feeding him more information. The predecessors hadn't vanished or died. They had evolved beyond physical form, transcending to exist in higher dimensions. But they had left their technology behind, waiting for a species capable of inheriting their role as protectors of the galaxy. They had influenced Earth's development over millions of years, adjusting its tectonic activity, its atmospheric composition, even causing strategic extinction events that forced life to adapt or die. Every aspect of Earth that made it dangerous, the high gravity, the violent weather, the aggressive megafauna, had been intentional. The predecessors were breeding their replacements, creating a species that combined physical capability with intelligence and adaptability. Humanity wasn't an accident. They were the product of 4 billion years of directed evolution. The next chamber was different. The atmosphere changed, the oxygen levels dropping dramatically. The other species immediately struggled, their respirators working overtime to extract enough breathable air. But humans had evolved at various altitudes. Their hemoglobin adapted to function efficiently across a wide range of oxygen concentrations. Marcus felt lightheaded but functional, able to solve the puzzle mechanisms that would restore normal atmosphere to the chamber. With each trial, the pattern became clearer. The predecessors had created tests that only their chosen inheritors could pass. Not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the most technologically advanced, but the one forged by the harshest natural conditions. Every other council species had evolved on easier worlds or had modified themselves with technology, trading away the raw adaptability that the predecessors valued. The final chamber took Marcus's breath away. It was massive, stretching so far in every direction that the walls disappeared in purple mist. Racks upon racks of equipment filled the space, weapons and armor that hummed with dormant power. This was the armory, the place the sword had been guiding him toward all along. In the center stood a holographic projection, larger and more detailed than the others. The predecessor spoke directly to Marcus, its voice resonating in his mind through the sword's neural link. You have proven your species worthy through trials of endurance, strength, and adaptability. But the final choice remains. Accept our legacy and become guardians of the galaxy, bearing responsibilities that will change your species forever. Or refuse, and this armory seals for eternity while our ancient enemies claim this world and continue their conquest. Commander Syrinx stood tall despite his exhaustion, his warrior's discipline keeping him alert. The other scientists gathered close, waiting for the human's decision. "This isn't just my choice to make," Marcus said aloud. "We came here as a team." The predecessors didn't value strength alone. They valued adaptation, survival, the ability to thrive under pressure. Every species has strengths. Humanity just happened to be forged by the right kind of world. Your species endured trials in this place that would have killed any of us. If the predecessors chose humans as inheritors, they chose well. You have my support. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a species specifically evolved to inherit the greatest technology in galactic history. Marcus turned back to the hologram and lifted the sword. "We accept." Systems that had been dormant for millions of years came online instantly. The sword in Marcus's hands transformed, becoming something more than just a weapon. It was now a command interface, connecting him to defensive systems that spread throughout the planet and into orbit. Through the neural link, Marcus saw the battle above. The enemy fleet had moved into bombardment position, preparing to sterilize the surface. But now the predecessor defenses activated, weapons that made modern technology look like primitive tools. Energy beams of impossible precision lanced out from hidden installations, not destroying the enemy ships but forcing them into retreat, sending a clear message that the inheritors had awakened. The biomechanical soldiers in the temple found themselves trapped as ancient security systems activated, containing them in stasis fields until they could be studied or disposed of. The immediate threat ended as quickly as it had begun, the enemy recognizing that they had lost this world. As the team made their way back to the surface using transport platforms that the armory provided, Marcus understood that everything had changed. Humanity would never be seen as the weak newcomers again. News of this discovery would spread through the Galactic Council within days. Humans would be recognized as the inheritors of the predecessors, guardians of technology and knowledge scattered across hundreds of worlds. They emerged from the temple to find the red sky of Keth 7 clear of hostile vessels. In the distance, Council rescue ships were already arriving, responding to the expedition's emergency beacons. Marcus stood with the sword on his back, no longer just an archaeologist, but the first of a new role his species would fill. Vethril approached him, the Krell scholar's demeanor completely different from before. I must revise every theory I have published about human evolution. Your species is now the most important subject of study in the galaxy. Other teams would go to other predecessor sites, each one requiring the specific traits that Earth had beaten into humanity over billions of years. The galaxy had a new guardian species, forged not in laboratories or through genetic modification, but through the simple, brutal process of natural selection on a world that refused to make survival easy. The council chambers on Valos Prime had never been so crowded. Representatives from every major species packed the observation galleries, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the translation systems struggled to process. At the center of the grand circular floor stood Marcus Chen, still wearing his dusty field clothes from Keth 7, the ancient sword strapped across his back in a hastily fabricated carrying harness. It had been only 5 standard days since the armory activation, but the news had spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Humanity, the species that had joined the Galactic Council barely 15 years ago, had been revealed as the chosen inheritors of the predecessors. The political implications were staggering. High Chancellor Mordarak, a Venthi whose species had led the Council for 3,000 years, raised one of her 6 crystalline appendages for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, though Marcus could feel the weight of thousands of eyes, sensors, and recording devices focused on him. Doctor. Chen, the Chancellor's voice resonated through the translation matrix. You stand before this council as the first human to activate a predecessor site. Your report has been reviewed by our Xenoarchaeology Committee, our military strategists, and our historical scholars. The consensus is unprecedented. We require clarification on several matters. The predecessor message stated that humans are their chosen inheritors, Chancellor Mordarak continued. Yet you claim this was not conquest or theft, but rather evolutionary design spanning billions of years. Explain how a species barely capable of space travel 15 years ago could be the culmination of the predecessor's grand plan. He gestured to the holographic display that flickered to life above the chamber floor, showing Earth rotating slowly in space. The predecessors didn't create humans directly, Marcus began, his voice steady. They engineered the conditions that would create us. 4.5 billion years ago, they adjusted Earth's formation, ensuring it had the right mass, the right distance from its star, the right magnetic field. They influenced its tectonic activity, creating a dynamic, unstable surface with constantly shifting continents. They didn't just want intelligent life, Marcus continued. Dozens of worlds produce that naturally. They wanted a species forged by adversity, tested by constant environmental pressure. Earth's high gravity meant any creature that evolved there needed dense bones and powerful muscles just to stand upright. The variable climate meant species needed adaptability or they died. The aggressive predators meant our ancestors developed endurance, tool use, and social cooperation. I have reviewed the geological data from Earth. The predecessor influence is subtle but undeniable once you know what to look for. Strategic asteroid impacts causing extinction events, atmospheric adjustments during critical evolutionary periods, even magnetic field fluctuations that increased mutation rates at specific times. Earth is not a natural world. It is a carefully managed project spanning eons. In our war games over the past days, human soldiers outperformed Thrain warriors in extended ground combat, Shen commandos in hostile environment operations, and Vorath troops in high-gravity assault scenarios. Not because they are stronger in absolute terms, but because they can maintain performance longer under adverse conditions. How would existing military alliances shift? What would human council membership mean now? This leads to our primary concern, Chancellor Mordarak said, her tone carefully neutral. There are reports of 6 additional predecessor sites activating across council space in the past 3 days, all responding to human presence. Your species now has potential access to technology that predates our civilizations by millions of years. The Council must know your intentions. Earth's government has no intention of using predecessor technology to establish dominance, Marcus stated clearly. But we also won't pretend the situation hasn't changed. The predecessors chose humans for a reason, and that reason is becoming clear. Those biomechanical soldiers that attacked Keth 7, according to the armory records, they're called the Scrapers. They're what remains of the predecessor's ancient enemy, and they've been dormant for millions of years, waiting for predecessor sites to activate. Chancellor Morduak demanded silence, her appendages flashing with agitation. "You're saying there's an active threat?" she asked. Marcus nodded grimly. "The Scrapers don't negotiate or coexist. They consume technological civilizations, breaking them down for resources and processing power. The predecessors fought them to a stalemate millions of years ago, then transcended to higher dimensions partly to escape them. But the Scrapers are patient. They've been waiting in dark space, monitoring for predecessor technology activation. When I lifted that sword, we announced our presence to something that sees all organic life as raw material. Then you have endangered the entire galaxy with your actions. We attributed those disappearances to natural disasters or civil wars, but the predecessor records tell a different story. The Scrapers are already here, already hunting. We just weren't aware of them. The predecessors didn't just leave weapons, Marcus explained. They left a responsibility. They bred humans to be guardians because they knew the Scrapers would eventually return. Every aspect of our evolution, our persistence, our adaptability, our ability to function in harsh environments, was preparation for a war we didn't know we'd have to fight. Human forces augmented with predecessor technology, supported by Council resources. We need the Thrain's tactical expertise, the Krell's scientific knowledge, the Shen's intelligence capabilities. The predecessors chose humans as inheritors, not conquerors. We're meant to unite the galaxy, not dominate it. The weight of the decision was enormous. There will need to be protocols, she finally said. Oversight committees, shared research initiatives, military coordination agreements. The Council cannot simply grant one species unlimited access to predecessor technology, regardless of their intended purpose. We're proposing a new Council division, the Predecessor Heritage Initiative, with representatives from all major species. Humans will lead the field operations, but all discoveries, all technology, will be shared and studied collectively. Back on Earth, there were already politicians demanding that humanity keep the predecessor legacy for themselves, using it to establish dominance. But Marcus had seen the armory's records, had felt the weight of the responsibility the predecessors intended. This wasn't about power, it was about survival. Over the next several hours, the Council debated, argued, and negotiated. Species that had been rivals for centuries found common ground in the face of the Scraper threat. Others remained suspicious, fearing human dominance despite Marcus's assurances. But gradually, a framework emerged. The Predecessor Heritage Initiative would be established with a diverse leadership council. Humans would have priority access to predecessor sites, but teams would always include representatives from other species. All technology would be analyzed jointly, with military applications requiring council approval. A new defensive fleet would be created, combining human ground forces with multi-species support elements. As the session concluded, Marcus stood exhausted but satisfied. This wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a foundation. Humanity had gone from newcomers to keystone species in less than a week, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the implications. Vethril approached him as the chamber emptied. "You handled that well, Dr. Chen. Many in your position would have leveraged this advantage for maximum political gain. They needed guardians, protectors. That requires a different mindset. Earth wasn't preparing you for space travel. It was preparing you for war. That's what the predecessors saw in us." Marcus could see human ships in orbit, more arriving every hour as Earth mobilized its population for the new reality. There would be challenges ahead, political tensions, species that resented humanity's sudden rise, and the ever-present threat of the Scrapers lurking somewhere in dark space. But for the first time since lifting that ancient sword, Marcus felt something beyond responsibility and fear. He felt hope. The galaxy had spent millions of years developing separately, each species progressing in isolation. Now they had a common purpose, a shared enemy, and a reason to truly unite. The predecessors had chosen well. Not because humans were superior, but because Earth had taught them that survival required cooperation, that strength came from endurance, and that the harshest challenges produced the most resilient results. Those lessons, beaten into humanity over billions of years, were exactly what the galaxy needed to face what was coming. Marcus touched the sword's hilt, feeling its warmth through the harness. Somewhere out in the vast darkness, the scrapers were watching, waiting. But they would find something they hadn't encountered in millions of years. A species bred specifically to oppose them, backed by allies who finally understood the true stakes of survival in a hostile universe. The inheritors had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Council summit, Marcus stood in the command center of Bastion Station, a newly constructed facility orbiting a predecessor site in the Outer Reach territories. The station represented everything the predecessor Heritage Initiative had accomplished in its short existence. A joint effort between 12 species, combining human personnel with alien expertise, all focused on a common goal. Through the observation window, Marcus watched as teams worked on the planet below. Another predecessor temple had been located, this one containing what the initial surveys suggested was a manufacturing facility. If they could activate it, the initiative would gain the ability to produce predecessor-grade materials, a breakthrough that would revolutionize Council technology. "Contact in Sector 7, Lieutenant Sarah Park announced from her station. The young human officer had been one of the first recruits to the initiative's military division, part of a new generation that would grow up knowing humanity's role as guardians. Unknown vessels, configuration matches Scraper signatures from the Keth 7 incident. The Scrapers had been probing Council's space for months, testing defenses, retreating before engagement. But something about this site had drawn them out in force. "How many?" he asked, moving to the tactical display. 15 capital ships, multiple smaller craft," Commander Cyrix reported from his position coordinating the defense fleet. The Thrain warrior had become Marcus's closest military advisor, their species differences creating an effective partnership. "They're moving into attack formation. Military units established defensive perimeter around the extraction zones." The Scrapers weren't interested in negotiation or territory. They wanted the predecessor sites destroyed and any species capable of using them eliminated. On the planet's surface, human soldiers worked alongside Thrain heavy infantry and Shen reconnaissance units to secure the evacuation routes. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable a year ago. 3 species that had never fought together, now operating as a coordinated force. The humans provided endurance and adaptability. The Thrain brought raw power and tactical discipline, and the Shen offered speed and intelligence gathering. Marcus touched the sword at his side, a smaller version of the one from Keth 7, attuned to him during the armory activation. Through its neural link, he could access the predecessor defensive systems scattered across this world. But those systems were designed for deterrence and containment, not full-scale warfare. The predecessors had been explorers and builders, not conquerors. Their weapons were powerful but limited in number. "Scrapers opening fire," Park announced, her voice tight with tension. "Targeting the archaeological sites directly. They're not interested in the station." The Scrapers had learned from Keth 7 that once a site went fully operational, it became nearly impossible to assault. "Activate all available predecessor defenses," Marcus commanded. "Route control through my interface." Automated defense platforms rose from hidden silos, targeting the enemy vessels with weapons that bent the laws of physics in ways Council scientists still couldn't fully explain. But there were gaps in the coverage. The predecessor defenses had degraded over millions of years, and entire sections were offline. The Scrapers found these weaknesses quickly, exploiting them with mechanical efficiency. "Scraper ground forces deploying," Cyrix reported. "Estimated 3,000 units, landing outside our defensive perimeter. We cannot let them reach the temples." Human soldiers in predecessor-enhanced armor moved through terrain that would have exhausted any other species, their earth-born endurance allowing them to fight for hours without rest. They wielded weapons that combined human firearms with predecessor energy systems, creating devastating hybrid designs that the Initiative's engineers had developed. The Thrain fought with their characteristic ferocity, their massive forms smashing through scraper lines, while their tactical coordination kept the enemy from overwhelming isolated positions. And the Shen moved like shadows, appearing where least expected, gathering intelligence that allowed the combined force to anticipate scraper movements. Marcus monitored it all through multiple displays, his enhanced sword allowing him to coordinate predecessor defensive systems while maintaining awareness of the broader tactical situation. It was overwhelming, pushing his cognitive abilities to their limits, but he had trained for this. Humans had always excelled at processing complex information under stress, another gift from their evolutionary crucible. "We're holding them," Syrinx said, and Marcus could hear the surprise in the warrior's voice. "They're adapting, but we're adapting faster." The scrapers were ancient and experienced, but they were also predictable. They followed optimal strategies calculated by machine intelligence. Humans, forged by the chaos of Earth's evolution, excelled at improvisation and creative problem-solving. When combined with alien capabilities and predecessor technology, this created something the scrapers hadn't encountered before: unpredictability backed by overwhelming force. A proximity alarm drew Marcus's attention to a new development. A massive scraper vessel, larger than anything they had encountered, was emerging from FTL at the system's edge. "Identify that ship," Marcus ordered. "Scanning now," Park replied, her fingers flying across her console. "It's reading as a harvester class, according to predecessor databases. This is what the scrapers use to consume entire planets. If it reaches orbit, all our defensive efforts become irrelevant." This had been the scrapers' strategy all along. The ground assault was a distraction, forcing the Initiative to commit forces planet-side while the real threat approached from deep space. "Council fleet, can you intercept?" he asked. "Negative," the fleet commander responded. "We're engaged with their capital ships. If we break formation, they'll destroy the evacuation transports." Once there, it would deploy weapons capable of cracking a planet's crust, rendering all the temples and their technology into molten slag. Everything they had worked for, all the lives already lost in this battle, would be for nothing. Unless he did something the scrapers wouldn't expect. "Vethril, are you on this channel?" Marcus asked. "Present," the Krell scientist responded from his research vessel at the system's periphery. "I see the harvester. There's nothing in Council arsenals that can stop it in time. It's dangerous, potentially unstable after millions of years, but it's our only option." The predecessor superweapon had been designed for last resort scenarios, and using it carried enormous risk not just to the scrapers but potentially to everyone in the system. "You would need to deliver it personally," Syrinx said. "The activation sequence requires a direct neural interface, and you're the only human in range with the necessary clearance. I'll take it to the planetary armory, retrieve the weapon, and intercept the harvester. And even if successful, the energy discharge could damage your ship beyond any hope of rescue. This is what the predecessors trained humanity for, right? Making impossible choices in impossible situations. Sir, regulations require a second officer accompany you on high-risk missions." Humanity had been chosen as guardians, but that didn't mean they had to face every threat alone. That had been the whole point of the Initiative. "Approved. Meet me in Hangar 3. Commander Syrinx, you have operational control. Keep those evacuation transports safe." The Temple's armory access point was in a contested zone, with scraper units less than a kilometer away. Marcus used the sword to open the sealed entrance, and they descended into depths where no other species could follow. The armory responded to his presence, ancient mechanisms activating as they had on Keth 7. At the chamber's center rested the weapon he had seen in the database, a cylindrical device 3 meters long, covered in the same symbols that marked all predecessor technology. "It's smaller than I expected," Park observed. "Don't let the size fool you," Marcus replied, interfacing with the control systems. "According to the records, this contains enough compressed energy to tear apart a harvester's molecular bonds." The predecessors called it the Unmaker. They only built 6 of them, and they were terrified of what they could do. Outside, the battle had intensified, but their forces held the perimeter long enough for the courier to launch. Marcus piloted personally, pushing the small ship to its maximum velocity as they raced to intercept the harvester. Through the viewport, the massive scraper vessel grew larger, a mountain of biomechanical architecture that dwarfed anything Council species had built. Its surface crawled with activity as it prepared its planet-killing weapons. Marcus could see smaller scraper ships breaking off to intercept his courier, recognizing the threat. "They know what we're carrying," Park said, manning the defensive systems. "Incoming fire." Park returned fire, her accuracy remarkable despite the evasive maneuvers Marcus performed. They were outnumbered 50-1, but they only needed to survive for another 3 minutes to reach activation range. Marcus activated the neural interface with the Unmaker, feeling its ancient consciousness touch his mind. The weapon was semi-aware, designed to ensure it could only be used with full understanding of its consequences. It showed him what would happen, a cascade reaction that would unmake the harvester's exotic matter composition, but also release enough energy to disable every ship within 10,000 kilometers for hours, including theirs. "I'm seeing the calculations too," Park said quietly. "We won't make it out." Now he was piloting a suicide run with experimental weapons from an extinct civilization, trying to save a galaxy that still wasn't sure it trusted humans. "The evacuation transports will make it out," he said, "and the temples will survive. That's what matters. They chose humanity. If I die today, there are millions more who can lift those swords, activate those temples, and continue the work." Marcus targeted the harvester's core, the massive central structure that coordinated its entire biomechanical network. "For what it's worth," Park said, "serving with you has been an honor." The weapon crossed the remaining distance in seconds, its predecessor guidance systems ensuring perfect accuracy. When it struck the harvester, there was a moment of absolute stillness, as if the universe itself paused to witness what came next. Then reality broke.